The drone of the baby monitor was the new soundtrack to Emily Carter's life. It was a hum punctuated by the soft, rhythmic sighs of 4-month-old Leo sleeping in his crib upstairs, or, more often, by the sharp, demanding cries that sliced through the quiet of their Willow Creek Estate's home. Emily, 32, a former marketing executive whose days were once dictated by campaign deadlines and client meetings, now found her hours measured in feeding schedules and nap windows. Their new house, one of many near-identical structures in the sprawling North Carolina development, was supposed to be the canvas for their perfect family portrait. 2-story, dove-gray siding, a porch swing Liam had promised to install, and a patch of lawn that was stubbornly resisting Emily's attempts at a vibrant green. Inside, curated Pottery Barn neutrals were slowly being overrun by the vibrant plastic chaos of babyhood. A playmat splayed across the living room rug, a bottle sterilizer dominating the granite countertop, a mountain of impossibly tiny laundry threatening to avalanche from its basket. It was early July, and the North Carolina summer had settled in with a vengeance, thick and humid, pressing down on Willow Creek like a damp wool blanket. Even the air conditioning seemed to struggle, sighing warily as it pumped out cool, dry air that never quite banished the oppressive weight of the outside world. Emily often felt that same oppressive weight pressing down on her chest. Liam, her husband of 5 years, was a good man. Or at least he had been. These days, Emily wasn't so sure what he was. He was absent. Even when physically present, his mind seemed to be elsewhere, lost in the intricate code of the software he developed for a demanding Charlotte startup. Or perhaps Emily was beginning to fear, somewhere else entirely. The shift had been subtle at first, easily attributable to the seismic upheaval of Leo's arrival. Liam, 34, was working longer hours, his brow perpetually furrowed with a stress that seemed to deepen with each passing week. "Big project," he'd murmur, kissing the top of Leo's head before retreating to his home office, the click of the door a soft, definitive barrier. "Gotta push through this quarter." Emily understood pressure. Her own career had been a high-wire act of ambition and execution. She'd thrived on it, but this was different. This wasn't the shared exhaustion of new parenthood she'd anticipated, the us-against-the-world camaraderie. This was a creeping separateness, a silence that filled the spaces where their easy laughter and late-night talks used to be. The late work nights had become more frequent, especially on Fridays. He'd call around 6, his voice tinny and distant. "Hey, Em, don't wait up. We're hitting a wall with this deployment." Might be an all-nighter. "Again, Liam, that's the 3rd Friday in a row." She tried to keep the edge from her voice, but sleep deprivation and a gnawing loneliness made it difficult. Leo would be stirring in her arms, his little mouth rooting for comfort. I know, it sucks. But this bonus, it'll make a huge difference. For us. For Leo." The mention of the bonus, of providing, was his standard deflection. It was hard to argue with. They had the new mortgage, the endless baby expenses, Emily's lost income. But a cold knot of unease would tighten in her stomach. It wasn't just the hours. It was the way he seemed when he finally came home, often well past midnight. He'd smell faintly of a cologne she didn't recognize, sharper, more sophisticated than his usual woodsy scent. And something else, something smoky and vaguely chemical that wasn't cigarettes. He'd be wired, his eyes too bright, yet he'd avoid her gaze, offering a cursory peck on her cheek before showering and collapsing into bed, turning his back to her. The intimacy they once shared, a vital current in their marriage, had dwindled to a trickle, then all but dried up. Emily missed his touch, his attention, the feeling of being seen and desired not just as mommy, but as Emily. She felt like a ghost in her own life, haunting the peripheries of her husband's new secret world. One sweltering Tuesday morning, while sorting a mountain of Liam's laundry, a task she both resented and clung to as a vestige of her wifely duties, she found it. Tucked deep into the pocket of his discarded jeans from the previous Friday night, the ones he'd tossed on the floor with uncharacteristic carelessness, was a crumpled receipt. Not from a restaurant, not from a gas station. It was from Vertex. Emily's blood ran cold. Vertex. She knew the name. It was one of Charlotte's most exclusive, notoriously decadent nightclubs. Pulsating music, velvet ropes, a crowd that dripped money and ambition. It was the kind of place she and Liam had occasionally joked about in their pre-baby life, the antithesis of their comfortable, home-centered existence. The kind of place people went to escape, to forget, to find someone else. Her hand trembled as she smoothed out the receipt. The date, last Friday. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m. The items, Cover charge $50. Vodka cranberry $18. Whiskey sour $19. Vodka cranberry $18. The total with a generous tip was staggering for a few drinks. Liam didn't drink vodka cranberries. He drank beer, occasionally whiskey, neat. The air in the laundry room suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. The rhythmic churn of the washing machine seemed to mock her, its relentless cycle a stark contrast to the sudden, violent halt of her own understanding. This wasn't a late night at the office. This wasn't about a bonus. This was a lie, a deliberate, calculated deception. The implications crashed over her in a sickening wave. The cologne, the strange smell, the avoidance. It all clicked into place, forming a picture so ugly, so devastating, that she could barely comprehend it. He was having an affair. The thought, once a whispered fear in the darkest corners of her mind, now blazed in neon certainty. Her analytical brain, the one that had dissected market trends and crafted winning strategies, went into overdrive, replaying every late night, every terse phone call, every evasive answer, now filtered through this new, horrifying lens. Leo's cry from the monitor, sharp and insistent, pierced through her shock. Emily dropped the receipt as if it were burning her skin. She stumbled out of the laundry room, her legs unsteady, and went to her son, her movements automatic. As she lifted Leo from his crib, his small, warm body a fragile anchor in the storm engulfing her, she looked at her reflection in the nursery mirror. A pale, hollow-eyed stranger stared back, a woman whose carefully constructed world had just been dynamited. The unraveling had begun, and Emily, betrayed and furious, knew one thing with chilling certainty. She would find out the truth, no matter how painful. The sting of this betrayal was too deep to ignore. She wouldn't just let him get away with it. She couldn't. The Vertex receipt became a toxic artifact, hidden away in Emily's lingerie drawer beneath silk scarves she rarely wore anymore. Yet its presence radiated through the house. It was a constant, silent accusation, fueling a corrosive suspicion that seeped into every interaction with Liam. She tried to be normal, for Leo's sake. She went through the motions, the diaper changes, the lullabies, the forced smiles during tummy time. But an invisible wall had risen between her and Liam, a wall built of her unspoken knowledge and his unacknowledged deceit. Mealtimes were fraught with tension. The comfortable silences they once shared now felt like vast, unbridgeable chasms. "Anything interesting happen at work today?" she'd ask, her voice carefully neutral as she spoon-fed Leo pureed carrots. Liam would shrug, his eyes on his phone, or a lingering work email on his laptop. Just the usual. Firewall issues, client demands. You know? She didn't know. Not anymore. She imagined him at Vertex, the dim, pulsating lights, the thrum of music, the anonymous bodies brushing against each other. Who was she? The woman who ordered vodka cranberries? Was she younger? More exciting? Someone who didn't smell of spit-up and desperation? The questions gnawed at her, relentlessly. The oppressive summer heat mirrored her internal state. Willow Creek, with its manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, felt like a pressure cooker. Neighbors like Mrs. Albright, a woman whose own children were long grown, would offer well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful advice over the fence. "Oh, these first few months are the hardest, dear, especially on a marriage. You young people have so much pressure. Just make sure you keep that spark alive." Emily would force a smile, the words like tiny daggers. Spark alive? My husband is probably igniting sparks with someone else at a nightclub. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Not just because of Leo, but because her mind raced, replaying conversations, searching for clues she might have missed. When Liam finally slept, a deep, exhausted slumber that seemed almost too peaceful, Emily would sometimes slip out of bed and check his phone. She hated herself for it, the furtive tapping on the screen, her heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and a desperate need to know. But his phone was always clean. No suspicious texts, no clandestine call logs. He was either incredibly careful or what? Was she imagining the extent of it? The receipt was real. The cologne was real. She confided in Chloe Davis, her best friend, during one of their late-night video calls. Chloe, a sharp-witted lawyer in Chicago, listened patiently as Emily tearfully laid out her suspicions. Vertex? Chloe's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Liam? Mr. Board Games and Craft Beer Liam? Are you sure, Em? The receipt, Chloe? And the smell, the way he acts. Emily's voice cracked. He's lying to me. I know he is. Chloe's expression hardened. Okay, honey. Okay, if he's lying, then he's an absolute bastard. After everything? With a new baby? No. Unacceptable. Chloe, fiercely loyal, immediately sided with Emily. So what are you going to do? I don't know, Emily whispered, wiping her eyes. I confronted him vaguely about the late nights. He just shut down, said I was being paranoid, that I was just tired. Classic gaslighting, Chloe snorted. Okay, look, you need proof. Hard proof, something undeniable. Otherwise, he'll just keep denying it, and you'll go crazy. Chloe's words, meant to be supportive, inadvertently fanned the flames of Emily's obsession. Hard proof. The phrase echoed in her mind. She started paying closer attention. Her analytical skills, honed by years in marketing, now focused on a single, devastating project, uncovering her husband's secret life. She noticed the subtle things. The way Liam now guarded his phone more closely, the new password on his laptop, the cash withdrawals from their joint account that he vaguely attributed to lunches or team coffees. Amounts that seemed excessive. He'd started taking his gym bag with him on those late work nights, claiming he'd hit the company gym to de-stress. But he never came home smelling of sweat and exertion, only that alien cologne and the faint, sharp tang of something else she still couldn't quite place. One evening, when Liam was supposedly at one of his client dinners, Emily, consumed by a desperate restlessness, drove past his office building downtown. The parking lot was mostly empty, the upper floors dark. His car was nowhere in sight. A cold dread settled in her stomach. He wasn't there. He was somewhere else. With her. The image of Liam with another woman, laughing, touching, sharing secrets, was a constant torment. It made her feel physically ill. Her appetite vanished. The baby weight she'd been meaning to lose started to melt away, but not in a way that brought any satisfaction. She saw the dark circles under her eyes, the new sharpness in her features. She was fading, hollowed out by suspicion and grief. The idea of the sting, as Chloe had half-jokingly, half-seriously called it, began to take root. If he wouldn't tell her the truth, she would have to find it herself. She needed to see it, to confront him in the act. Only then, perhaps, could the denial stop, and whatever came next, a messy divorce, a painful reckoning, could begin. She started planning meticulously, like one of her old marketing campaigns. Another Friday was approaching. Liam had already mentioned a critical server upgrade that would likely keep him late. It was the perfect opportunity. She found a local teenage babysitter, Katie, highly recommended on the Willow Creek Community Facebook page, a sweet, responsible girl who was available on Friday nights. Just for a few hours, Emily told Katie, trying to sound casual. I have a work thing I need to attend to, a networking event. The lie felt clumsy on her tongue. As Friday drew closer, a maelstrom of emotions churned within Emily. Cold fury warred with a desperate, lingering hope that she was wrong, that there was some other explanation, however improbable. But the evidence, circumstantial as it was, pointed to one devastating conclusion. The humid summer air felt more suffocating than ever. The sky, a bruised purple at dusk, seemed to press down on her. She felt trapped, not just in her home, but in this unbearable limbo of not knowing, yet somehow knowing too much. On that Friday afternoon, as a thunderstorm began to brew in the distance, its low rumbles a counterpoint to Leo's contented gurgles, Emily steeled herself. She laid out a black dress she hadn't worn since before Leo was born, a stark contrast to her usual daytime uniform of yoga pants and stained t-shirts. She applied makeup with a hand that trembled slightly, trying to paint on a mask of composure she didn't feel. Tonight, she would go to Vertex. Tonight, she would confront Liam. Tonight, the truth, however ugly, would finally come out. The thought filled her with a terrifying, almost exhilarating dread. The web of suspicion had been spun. Now it was time to see what it had caught. The first fat raindrop splattered against the windshield as Emily pulled away from Willow Creek Estates. Katie, the babysitter, had arrived a few minutes earlier, her cheerful teenage energy a jarring contrast to the grim determination hardening Emily's features. Leo was asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically, oblivious to the tempest brewing both outside and within his mother. He usually sleeps through till about 10, Emily had instructed, her voice tighter than she intended. If he wakes up, there's a bottle in the fridge. My phone will be on. Driving towards downtown Charlotte, Emily felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching herself in a movie. The city lights ahead blurred into streaks as the rain intensified, and the wipers struggling to keep pace. The distant rumbles of thunder grew closer, more insistent, mirroring the frantic thumping of her own heart. Liam had left an hour earlier, a quick peck on her cheek, the familiar, "Don't wait up. Big push tonight." He'd even feigned disappointment. "Wish I could just stay home with you guys." The casual lie, delivered so smoothly, had been another twist of the knife. He was good at this. Too good. The closer she got to Vertex, the more unreal it all felt. The club was situated in a revitalized warehouse district. Its entrance marked by a discreet, glowing sign and a velvet rope manned by two imposing bouncers. Even on a stormy night, a small, stylishly dressed crowd huddled under the awning, eager to escape into the manufactured euphoria within. Emily parked a block away, her hands clammy on the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, the scent of rain and exhaust fumes filling her lungs. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back looked like a stranger. Her eyes too bright, her expression a mixture of fear and a chilling resolve. This wasn't the Emily who cooed at her baby or meticulously planned organic meals. This was a woman on the edge, driven by a primal need for truth. She walked towards Vertex, the wind whipping her hair around her face, the rain soaking through her thin dress. The bass from inside the club pulsed through the pavement, a visceral throb that seemed to resonate deep in her chest. Handing over the exorbitant cover charge, she stepped inside. The assault on her senses was immediate and overwhelming. A wall of sound, electronic dance music at a deafening volume, hit her, vibrating through her bones. Strobe lights flashed, fracturing the darkness into disorienting shards, illuminating a sea of writhing bodies. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, expensive perfume, and spilled alcohol. It was a world away from the quiet, ordered predictability of Willow Creek. It was alien, intoxicating, and terrifying. Emily scanned the dimly lit space, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for Liam. The main dance floor was a chaotic mass of people. She pushed her way through, feeling a rising tide of panic. Every tall, dark-haired man made her heart leap, only to deflate in disappointment or a strange, twisted relief. She checked the multiple bars, the lounge areas with their plush velvet seating, the periphery of the dance floor. He wasn't there. Or if he was lost in this hedonistic labyrinth. Could she have been wrong? Could he really be at the office, battling server gremlins? A tiny, desperate flicker of hope ignited, only to be doused by the cold memory of the receipt, the cologne, the lies. An hour passed. The initial adrenaline rush began to fade, replaced by a weary frustration. The heat, the noise, the sheer foreignness of it all began to feel oppressive. She felt a growing sense of foolishness. What was she even doing here? Playing detective? This wasn't her. Then a thought struck her. A sudden, sharp intuition born of knowing Liam's habits. He hated crowds, especially when parking. He always sought out the quietest, most remote spot in any parking garage. Vertex had a multi-story garage attached to it, accessible from a side street. Her heart pounding anew, Emily pushed her way back through the throng, past the bouncers, and out into the relative quiet of the rain-swept street. The storm was directly overhead now, lightning cracking across the sky, followed by deafening claps of thunder. The parking garage was dimly lit, eerie. Each level was a concrete expanse, sparsely populated with cars. She started at the bottom, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space, her eyes scanning for Liam's dark blue sedan. Level by level, she ascended, a growing sense of dread coiling in her stomach. What if he wasn't here either? What if this whole night was a monumental, humiliating mistake? She reached the 5th level, near the top. It was almost deserted. And then she saw it. Tucked away in a far corner, isolated from the few other vehicles, was Liam's car. A wave of something unidentifiable washed over her. Triumph? Fear? Relief that the search was over? She couldn't tell. Her legs felt like lead as she approached the vehicle. The windows were fogged from the humidity and the rain lashing against them. She drew closer, peering through the driver's side window, wiping away condensation with her sleeve. At first, she just saw his silhouette, slumped against the headrest. Relief, sharp and immediate, flooded her. He was just sitting there. Maybe he'd had an argument with his whoever. Maybe he was just cooling off. Then she saw his face, illuminated briefly by a distant flash of lightning. It was unnaturally pale, almost gray. His eyes were closed, but not in a restful way. There was a slackness to his features that terrified her. Her breath hitched. She whispered, her voice swallowed by the wind and rain. She tapped on the window. No response. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She fumbled for the door handle. Unlocked. She pulled it open. The interior light flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow over the scene within. Liam was slumped sideways, his breathing shallow, ragged. On the passenger seat, an empty prescription pill bottle lay on its side, its label stark white against the dark upholstery. Next to it, a crumpled piece of paper. A note. Liam! She shook his shoulder, her voice cracking with terror. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't truly respond. A faint, almost inaudible moan escaped his lips. Emily's carefully constructed narrative of infidelity, her anger, her righteous sting operation, it all vaporized in an instant, consumed by a black hole of horror. This wasn't betrayal. This was something far, far worse. This was despair. This was a man who had reached the very precipice of an unimaginable abyss. Her mind reeled, struggling to process the scene. The nightclub, the cover charge, the drinks on the receipt. Were they just a desperate, clumsy attempt to create a different kind of secret? A mask for a pain so profound he couldn't bear to show it, even to her? The rain hammered down on the roof of the car. The thunder cracked like the sky was splitting open. Emily's world had just done the same. The carefully planned sting had led her not to a cheating husband, but to a man broken, on the verge of self-destruction. Her training as a marketing executive, her meticulous planning, her anger, none of it mattered now. All that remained was a primal, desperate need to save him. "No," she sobbed, her hands fumbling for her phone, her fingers slick with rain and fear. "No, Liam, no." The numbers 911 glowed on her screen. With a trembling finger, she pressed call. The sting was over. A different, more terrible reality had just begun. The wail of the approaching siren cut through the roar of the storm, a sound both terrifying and a beacon of desperate hope. Emily was kneeling beside Liam in the cramped confines of the car, her hand pressed to his neck, searching for the faint, thready pulse. His skin was clammy, his breathing still alarmingly shallow. The note on the passenger seat lay untouched, a stark white rectangle of unspoken agony she couldn't yet bring herself to read. "Stay with me, Liam," she pleaded, her voice hoarse. "Please, just stay with me. Help is coming." The paramedics arrived, efficient and grim-faced, their movements practiced and urgent. They pulled Liam from the car, laid him on a gurney, the rain plastering his dark hair to his ashen forehead. Questions were fired at Emily. What did he take? How much? When? But her mind was a chaotic blur. She could only point mutely at the empty pill bottle, her own prescription sleeping aids from the difficult early weeks with Leo, a bottle she'd thought was half full. How had he even gotten it? "Ma'am, are you coming with us?" one of the paramedics asked, his voice firm but not unkind. Emily nodded, numbly. She followed them into the ambulance, the doors closing with a thud that seemed to seal them off from the outside world. The journey to Charlotte General was a surreal nightmare of flashing lights, the acrid smell of antiseptic, and the clipped, professional voices of the medics working on Liam. She watched, feeling utterly helpless, as they inserted an IV, monitored his vitals, their faces betraying nothing. At the hospital, the emergency room was a cacophony of controlled chaos. Bright lights, beeping machines, hushed, urgent conversations. Liam was wheeled away through a set of double doors, and Emily was left standing alone in a sterile corridor, shivering in her damp dress, the adrenaline beginning to wear off, leaving behind a bone-deep chill. A nurse with kind eyes and a name tag that read Sarah gently guided her to a small private waiting room. "Someone will be out to speak with you soon," she said softly. "Can I get you a blanket? Some coffee?" Emily could only shake her head, words failing her. The image of Liam in the car, pale and unresponsive, was burned into her retinas. The anger, the suspicion, the carefully constructed narrative of betrayal, all of it had been incinerated by the raw, terrifying reality of his despair. What had driven him to this? How could she, his wife, the person who was supposed to know him best, have been so blind? The questions circled relentlessly, each one a fresh stab of guilt and confusion. Her meticulous investigation, her righteous fury, now seemed monstrously misguided. She had been hunting for an affair while her husband was silently drowning. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor, young and serious-looking, entered the room. "Mrs. Carter?" Emily shot to her feet. Will he be okay?" "We've stabilized him," Dr. Chen said, his expression cautious. "He ingested a significant amount of zolpidem. We're pumping his stomach, and he's on IV fluids. He's not out of the woods, but his vital signs are improving. We'll need to keep him under observation, and a psychiatric consultation will be mandatory once he's medically stable." Relief, so potent it was dizzying, washed over Emily, quickly followed by the chilling implications of psychiatric consultation. This wasn't just a physical crisis. "Why?" Emily whispered, the word barely audible. "Why would he do this?" Dr. Chen's gaze softened. "We found a note. The police have it now, standard procedure, but they allowed me to read it. It seems he was under immense pressure, depression, feelings of inadequacy." He paused. Mrs. Carter, these situations are incredibly complex. It's rarely one single thing. The note, she had forgotten about the note. The police, of course, they would be involved. Her carefully planned sting had become a potential crime scene. The irony was a bitter pill. Left alone again, Emily finally pulled out her phone. Her fingers fumbled as she dialed Chloe's number. It was well past 2 a.m. in Chicago. Chloe answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Em, what's wrong? Did you find him? That bastard. Chloe, Emily choked out, the dam of her composure finally breaking. Sobs racked her body as she relayed the horrific events of the night. The parking garage, the pills, the ambulance. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Chloe's voice, stripped of all its earlier bravado, filled with shock and concern. Oh my God, Em! Oh my God, is Liam okay? They think so, Emily sobbed. But Chloe, I was so wrong, so wrong. It wasn't another woman. It was this. I'm booking the first flight out, Chloe said immediately. Don't even argue. I'll be there by morning. Just hang on, okay? Are you okay? Emily couldn't answer. Was she okay? She felt like her entire world had been upended, her understanding of her husband, her marriage, herself, shattered into a million pieces. Hours later, as the gray light of a rain-washed dawn began to filter through the hospital window, a police officer, a kind-faced woman named Officer Miller, came to take her statement. Emily recounted the events leading up to her discovery, omitting for now the initial suspicions of an affair, focusing only on her growing concern for Liam's late nights and her decision to find him. It felt like a partial truth, but the full story was too raw, too shameful to articulate yet. Officer Miller handed her a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was the note. You can have this back now, she said gently. We've made a copy. With trembling hands, Emily took the bag. After the officer left, she sank onto a hard plastic chair and carefully unfolded the single sheet of paper. Liam's familiar handwriting, usually so neat and precise, was jagged, almost illegible in places, as if written by a hand shaking uncontrollably. Em, it began. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm a failure. A failure as a husband, as a father, as a provider. The pressure, it's too much. I see the disappointment in your eyes. I know I'm not the man you married, not the father Leo deserves. This startup, this house, this life. I'm drowning, and I'm dragging you both down with me. The club, Vertex, it was just a place to disappear, to feel nothing for a few hours. No one knows me there. It wasn't what you might think. It was just oblivion, a stupid, expensive way to numb the pain. But it doesn't work anymore. Nothing works. I love you, Emily. I love Leo more than life itself. But I can't keep hurting you. You'll be better off without me. Please, tell Leo. Tell him his dad loved him. Forgive me, Liam. Each word was a fresh stab to Emily's heart. The casual cruelty of her suspicions, her relentless pursuit of a phantom affair, now seemed unforgivably blind. He hadn't been seeking pleasure. He'd been seeking an escape from unbearable pain. The nightclub, the drinks, they were a desperate, misguided attempt to self-medicate, to create a different kind of secret, perhaps one less shameful in his mind than the truth of his crumbling mental state. The guilt was a crushing weight. She had been so wrapped up in her own hurt, her own perceived betrayal, that she had completely missed the signs of his profound suffering. The disappointment in your eyes. Had he misinterpreted her worry, her frustration, her exhaustion as condemnation? Later that morning, they allowed her to see Liam. He was asleep, his face still pale but peaceful now, an IV drip snaking into his arm. A psychiatrist, Dr. Ramirez, a calm, thoughtful woman, met Emily outside his room. Mr. Carter is resting, Dr. Ramirez said. Physically, he's recovering, but the journey ahead will be challenging. He's experiencing a severe depressive episode, compounded by acute anxiety and stress. We'll need to work with him closely, and with you, Mrs. Carter. Family support is crucial. Family support. The words echoed in Emily's mind. She had almost destroyed her family by pursuing a ghost, while the real demon, depression, had been stalking her husband. Chloe arrived mid-morning, her face etched with concern. She hugged Emily tightly, wordlessly, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Emily felt a flicker of something other than terror and guilt. A fragile thread of support. The drive back to Willow Creek later that day, leaving Liam in the hospital's psychiatric observation unit, was the longest of Emily's life. Chloe drove, navigating the familiar suburban streets that now seemed alien and menacing. The house, when they entered it, felt cold and empty, despite the lingering scent of baby powder and the cheerful clutter of Leo's toys. Katie, the babysitter, had left a note. Leo was an angel. Hope your event went well. Emily stared at the cheerful scrawl, a fresh wave of nausea washing over her. Her event. Once Leo was fed and settled in his crib for a nap, Emily finally collapsed onto the sofa. The full weight of the night, of Liam's note, of her own catastrophic misjudgment, crashed down on her. She began to sob, deep, wrenching sounds of grief, guilt, and an overwhelming, terrifying uncertainty about what the future held. Chloe sat beside her, rubbing her back, offering a silent, steady presence in the wreckage of Emily's world. The long night was over, but the journey through its dark aftermath was just beginning. The days that followed Liam's suicide attempt were a blur of hushed phone calls, trips to the hospital, and the relentless anchoring rhythm of caring for Leo. Chloe stayed for a week, a calm, practical presence who managed to field concerned calls from Liam's bewildered parents in Ohio, deflect the well-meaning but intrusive inquiries from Mrs. Albright next door. Is everything all right, dear? Haven't seen Liam's car, and ensure Emily remembered to eat. The Carter home in Willow Creek Estates, once a symbol of their aspirations, now felt like a stage set for a play. Emily no longer understood. The manicured lawns and quiet streets outside seemed to mock the turmoil within. The oppressive summer heat lingered, a constant reminder of the stifling atmosphere that had preceded the storm. Liam remained in the hospital's psychiatric unit. Emily visited him daily, armed with forced cheerfulness and a heart heavy with unspoken words. He was quiet, subdued, his eyes holding a haunted, distant look that chilled her to the bone. The vibrant, quick-witted man she had married seemed to be buried deep beneath layers of medication and despair. Their conversations were stilted, superficial. "How are you feeling?" Emily would ask. "Okay," he'd mumble, avoiding her gaze. "Tired. Leo misses you." He smiled today, a real smile. A flicker of something, pain, longing, would cross his face, then vanish. "That's good." The note, his desperate confession, lay between them like an unexploded bomb. Emily didn't know how to address it, how to bridge the chasm of his pain and her guilt. She wanted to scream, to apologize, to rage, to understand, but the words caught in her throat, trapped by the sterile environment of the hospital room and the profound fragility of the man before her. Dr. Ramirez, the psychiatrist, met with Emily regularly. "Liam is suffering from severe clinical depression and anxiety. Mrs. Carter," she explained, her voice gentle but firm. "This wasn't an impulsive act. It was the culmination of a long period of silent suffering. He felt an immense pressure to provide, to be the strong husband and father, and he equated asking for help with failure. But why didn't he talk to me?" Emily asked, the question a raw ache in her chest. "The nightclub? Vertex. He said in the note, it wasn't what I thought. He went there to disappear?" Dr. Ramirez nodded. It's not uncommon for individuals struggling with depression to seek out maladaptive coping mechanisms. Sometimes, anonymity, even in a chaotic environment, can feel like a temporary escape from overwhelming internal pain. He may have been trying to create a different narrative for his absences, one he perceived as less shameful than admitting he was falling apart. Less shameful. The words stung. Had her pursuit of the affair narrative somehow reinforced his shame, pushed him further away? The guilt was a relentless companion. When Chloe had to return to Chicago, Emily felt a fresh wave of panic. But Chloe, ever practical, had helped her set up a support system. She'd found the details for Dr. Evelyn Reed, a therapist specializing in perinatal mental health and couples counseling, highly recommended within the Charlotte medical community. "You need to talk to someone too, Em?" Chloe had insisted. "You can't carry this alone." Emily made the appointment, her voice trembling as she spoke to the receptionist. The thought of dissecting her own emotions, her own role in this crisis, was daunting. Liam was discharged from the hospital a week later with a detailed outpatient treatment plan, medication, individual therapy with Dr. Ramirez, and a strong recommendation for couples counseling. He came home a shadow of his former self, quiet and withdrawn, moving through their house like a polite, distant guest. The silence in the house was a palpable entity, thick and suffocating. Emily found herself watching him constantly, her anxiety a tight knot in her stomach. Every time he seemed too quiet, too still, a jolt of fear would go through her. Sleep remained elusive, her nights punctuated by Leo's cries and her own racing thoughts. One evening, about a week after Liam returned home, Emily was rocking Leo in the nursery. Liam stood in the doorway watching them, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Liam, we need to talk about your note." He flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor. "There's nothing to say, Em. I messed up. I'm sorry I scared you. Scared me? Her voice rose, laced with a pain she could no longer contain. Liam, you tried to? You almost. She couldn't finish the sentence. Your note said you felt like a failure, that you saw disappointment in my eyes. He looked up then, his eyes filled with a deep, weary sadness. Didn't you? Disappointed that I wasn't stronger, that I couldn't handle it? The job, the mortgage, being a dad? I was drowning, Em, and I didn't want to pull you and Leo down with me. But you weren't pulling us down, Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. We're a family, Liam. We're supposed to face things together. Why didn't you tell me how bad it was? Why the nightclub? Why the lies? I didn't know how, he said, his voice raw. It was easier to pretend, to be out, to be busy, than to admit I was broken. The club, it was stupid, a way to feel anonymous, just for a little while, to not be me. There was never anyone else, Emily. I swear. His words, the desperate sincerity in his eyes, chipped away at the last vestiges of her anger, leaving only a profound, aching sorrow. She had been so focused on a betrayal of fidelity that she had missed the deeper betrayal. His betrayal of himself, his silent surrender to despair. I believe you, she whispered. And she did. The realization settled within her, heavy and sad. But Liam, your silence, it almost cost you everything. It almost cost us everything. She put Leo, now asleep, into his crib, and then walked over to Liam. She reached out, tentatively, and took his hand. It felt cold, unresponsive, but he didn't pull away. We have an appointment with Dr. Reed, she said softly, for couples therapy, next Tuesday. He nodded, his gaze still fixed on some distant point. Okay. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a magical fix. But it was a word, a beginning, a fragile acknowledgement that the silence, the weight of unspoken pain could not continue. The journey ahead was daunting, shrouded in uncertainty. But for the first time since that horrific night in the parking garage, a tiny, almost imperceptible sliver of light pierced through the darkness. They had taken the first tentative step onto a long, difficult path. The path towards understanding, and perhaps, eventually, towards healing. The therapy office of Dr. Evelyn Reed was a calm oasis, a stark contrast to the emotional battlefield Emily and Liam had been navigating. Soft lighting, comfortable armchairs, a faint scent of lavender. It was a space designed for difficult conversations. Dr. Reed herself was a woman in her late 50s, with kind, intelligent eyes and a presence that was both grounding and empathetic. Their first few sessions were excruciating. Liam was still heavily medicated, his responses often monosyllabic, his gaze averted. Emily, on the other hand, found herself overflowing with a torrent of emotions: anger, guilt, fear, profound sadness. She talked about her suspicions of an affair, the sting operation, the horror of finding him in the car, the crushing weight of his note. She laid bare her own blindness, her misinterpretations, her desperate need for control in a situation that had spiraled far beyond it. I was so convinced he was betraying me with another woman, Emily confessed, her voice thick with tears, that I never once considered he might be betraying himself, that he was in so much pain. Doctor, Reed listened patiently, nodding, occasionally asking gentle, probing questions. Emily, your feelings of betrayal were real, based on the information you had, the secrecy, the unexplained absences. It's important to acknowledge that. What Liam was experiencing, his depression, doesn't invalidate your emotional response to his actions, even if the presumed cause was different. To Liam, Dr. Reed was equally direct, yet compassionate. Liam, your note spoke of feeling like a failure, of seeing disappointment in Emily's eyes. Can you tell us more about where those feelings originated? Slowly, painfully, over several weeks, Liam began to talk. He spoke of the immense pressure at his startup, the fear of layoffs, the crushing weight of the new mortgage, and the financial responsibility for his family, especially with Emily no longer working. He talked about the sleepless nights, not just from Leo, but from his own racing, anxious thoughts. He confessed to feeling like an imposter, a fraud who was barely holding it together. Being a dad, it was supposed to be, I don't know, natural, he said, his voice barely above a whisper in one session. But I felt clumsy, useless. Emily was so good with Leo, and I felt like I was always in the way, or doing it wrong. And the crying, sometimes I just couldn't take it. I felt like a monster for thinking that. The nightclub, Vertex, he admitted, his face flushing with shame. It started as a way to just breathe, to not be dad or husband or failing software engineer for a few hours. No one knew me. I could just sit in a dark corner and numb myself. I'd have a couple of drinks. The vodka cranberries were just something different, saying not me. I know it sounds pathetic. It sounds like you were desperate for an escape, Liam, Dr. Reed said gently. And you didn't feel you could share that desperation with Emily. How could I? Liam asked, his voice raw. She was already exhausted dealing with Leo, with me being distant. How could I burden her with my own weakness? I was supposed to be the strong one. This idea of being the strong one, Liam, Dr. Reed probed. Where does that come from? Is that a pressure you put on yourself, or something you feel society expects of you, of men? The sessions were draining, emotionally raw. There were days Emily left Dr. Reed's office feeling utterly depleted, wondering if they would ever find their way back to each other. The image of the perfect family they had once aspired to was in ruins. What they were trying to build now felt fragile, uncertain, like sifting through rubble for anything salvageable. At home, the atmosphere remained tense, but the oppressive silence began to lift, replaced by hesitant, often clumsy attempts at communication. Emily learned to ask different kinds of questions, not, "Are you okay?" which usually elicited a reflexive "fine," but "How was your session with Dr. Ramirez today?" Or, "What's one thing that felt difficult for you today?" She also started her own individual therapy, separate from Liam's and their couple sessions. It was a space for her to unpack her own anxieties, her fear of abandonment, her grief for the marriage she thought she had, and her struggle to reconcile the Liam she loved with the man who had hidden such profound despair. She talked about her lost career identity, the isolation of new motherhood, and the societal pressure to be the perfect, all-sacrificing mother and wife. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. The heavy shroud of Liam's depression started to lift, inch by inch. The medication, adjusted by Dr. Ramirez, began to take fuller effect, clearing some of the fog from his mind. He started to engage more with Leo, not with the forced cheerfulness of before, but with a tentative, genuine interest. Emily would watch him sitting on the floor, patiently trying to get Leo to grasp a soft block, a small, fragile smile playing on his lips. These moments were like tiny shoots of green pushing through scorched earth. One cool late September evening, as the oppressive summer humidity finally gave way to the crisp, clear air of early autumn, Emily found Liam on the porch, finally assembling the swing he'd bought months ago. He worked methodically, his brow furrowed in concentration, but it was a different kind of furrow than the one etched by stress and despair. She brought him a glass of iced tea and sat on the steps. Leo was asleep upstairs. "Thanks," he said, taking a sip. He gestured to the half-assembled swing. Figured it was about time. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, a silence that was no longer fraught with unspoken accusations, but filled with a quiet, shared understanding of the journey they were on. "Dr. Reed said something today," Emily said softly. She said that sometimes relationships have to be broken down to their foundations to be rebuilt stronger, more authentically. Liam stopped tinkering with a bolt and looked at her. Do you think we can do that? Rebuild?" His voice was hesitant, vulnerable. Emily met his gaze. The shadows were still there in his eyes, but there was also a flicker of something new. Hope, perhaps, or at least a willingness to try. "I don't know, Liam," she said honestly. "It's hard. Some days I'm still so angry and scared." But then she paused, searching for the right words. "Then I remember that night, and I know we can't go back to how things were. Not the silence, not the pretending. If we rebuild, it has to be with honesty, no matter how painful." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Honesty. I'm trying, Em. It's hard to talk about this stuff, to admit how bad it got, but I am trying." He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "The man you married, he got lost. I got lost. I don't know if I can find him again, not exactly, but maybe we can find someone new. Together." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow or anger. They were tears of a fragile, this nascent hope. She reached out and placed her hand over his on the wooden plank of the swing. "Maybe we can," she whispered. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was cool and clean. The porch swing wasn't finished, but it was taking shape. It was a start. The ruins of their old life were still visible, the scars still tender. But amidst them, something new, something more honest and resilient, was beginning, slowly, to be built. The months that followed were a testament to the slow, arduous nature of healing. Autumn deepened, the leaves in Willow Creek turning brilliant shades of red and gold before falling, blanketing the pristine lawns in a temporary, beautiful disarray. It felt symbolic to Emily, the shedding of old pretenses, the exposure of something more fundamental beneath. Liam continued his therapy with Dr. Ramirez and his medication regimen. The deep fog of his depression had lifted significantly, replaced by a more manageable landscape of good days and challenging ones. He learned to identify his triggers, to articulate his anxieties before they became overwhelming, and to challenge the harmful narrative of masculine stoicism that had kept him silent for so long. He started a new, less demanding job at a more established tech company, one that valued work-life balance, a concept he was slowly beginning to embrace. Emily, too, found solace and strength in her individual therapy. She explored her own patterns, her need for control, her fear of vulnerability. She began to reconnect with aspects of herself she'd lost in the whirlwind of new motherhood and marital crisis. Her intellect, her creativity. She started a blog, writing anonymously about the challenges of modern motherhood and mental health, finding an outlet and a surprising sense of community online. Their couples sessions with Dr. Reed became less about crisis management and more about building new foundations. They learned to communicate with an honesty that was often uncomfortable, but ultimately liberating. They talked about their expectations, their fears, their dreams for the future, dreams that were now tempered with a realism born of hard experience. The illusion of the perfect American dream. Family had been shattered, and in its place, they were slowly, painstakingly crafting something far more authentic. Trust was the most difficult piece to rebuild. For Emily, the specter of Liam's secrecy, even though its cause was now understood, still lingered. For Liam, the fear of judgment, of disappointing Emily again, was a constant hurdle. But they worked at it, day by day, through small acts of transparency and reassurance. Liam shared his anxieties openly, even when it was difficult. Emily learned to listen without immediately trying to fix things, to hold space for his vulnerability. There were setbacks, of course. Days when old anxieties flared, when communication broke down, when the weight of what they had been through felt too heavy. But now, instead of retreating into silence or suspicion, they had tools. They had Dr. Reed. They had a shared commitment to not letting the darkness swallow them again. One crisp Saturday morning in late October, nearly 4 months after that terrible night, Emily woke to the sound of Leo's happy babbling from his crib. Liam was already up, and the aroma of coffee and pancakes filled the house. She found him in the kitchen, Leo perched in his high chair, gleefully smearing banana on his face, Liam flipping pancakes at the stove. He turned and smiled at her, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached his eyes. It was a smile she hadn't seen in a very long time. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said. "Pancakes are almost ready." Emily leaned against the doorframe, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It was small, ordinary, yet it felt profoundly significant. This was a different kind of dawn, a quiet rebuilding of normalcy, infused with a newfound appreciation for its preciousness. Later that day, they took Leo to a local park. The autumn air was invigorating, the sunlight dappled through the thinning canopy of leaves. Liam pushed Leo on the baby swings, his laughter mingling with their son's delighted squeals. Emily watched them, a complex tapestry of emotions weaving through her. Gratitude, a lingering sadness for what they had lost, but also a quiet, resilient hope for what they were building. As they walked back to the car, Liam reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I was thinking about Vertex the other day." Emily's breath caught slightly. The name still held a faint, chilling echo. "Not in a bad way, exactly," he continued, sensing her unease. "More like, it's a scar, a reminder of how far down I went, and how lucky I am that you were there, that you didn't give up on me, even when I'd given up on myself." Emily squeezed his hand. "I almost did, Liam," she said softly, honestly. "I was so lost in my own narrative, my own pain. But you weren't," he said, stopping and turning to face her. "You pulled me back, and then we started to find our way back to each other. Slowly." He looked at her, his eyes clear and earnest. "I know I can never fully make up for the pain I caused you, for the fear. But I promise you, Em, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the partner you deserve, the father Leo deserves. An honest one." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "That's all I've ever wanted, Liam. Honesty. Partnership." They stood there for a moment, under the golden autumn sky, the sound of children's laughter drifting from the playground. The wounds were still there, and perhaps they would always carry the scars of that terrible summer. But they were no longer gaping, raw. They were beginning to heal, knit together by shared vulnerability, hard-won understanding, and a love that had been tested in the fiercest of fires and had somehow, against all odds, endured. Later that evening, after Leo was asleep, they sat together on the porch swing Liam had finally finished assembling. It creaked gently as they rocked, a comforting, rhythmic sound in the quiet suburban night. The air was cool, and Emily leaned into Liam's warmth. "Remember when we first bought this house?" Emily murmured. "We had all these plans. The perfect picket fence, the perfect garden, the perfect family." Liam chuckled softly, a dry, knowing sound. "Yeah, turns out perfect is overrated and exhausting." He paused, then said, "I like this better." "This?" Emily asked. "This," he repeated, gesturing vaguely at the night, at their quiet street, at the swing beneath them. "Messy, imperfect, real. Knowing that we can face the dark stuff together and come out the other side. Maybe not unscathed, but stronger, more honest." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. He was right. The idealized American dream they had chased, the pressure to maintain a facade of effortless perfection, had nearly destroyed them. What they had now was something far more valuable. A relationship forged in the crucible of crisis, stripped bare of pretense, and slowly being rebuilt on a foundation of truth, empathy, and a hard-earned appreciation for the fragile beauty of human connection. The lessons had been brutal, the journey arduous. But as they sat there in the quiet of an ordinary autumn night, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long, long time. It wasn't the giddy excitement of new love, nor the comfortable complacency of an untested marriage. It was something deeper, more resilient. A quiet strength, born from having stared into the abyss and chosen together to walk towards the light. A different kind of dawn, indeed. And for now, for today, it was enough. It was more than enough.